I did repost it.
The Ag Tribes Report is brought to you by Legacy Interviews, a video service that captures people as they really are, so the future knows who they really were. Here are Legacy Interviews guests Mark and Stephanie Mendenhall on the unexpected ease of their experience.
What'd you guys think? How was it?
Much easier than I expected.
Yep.
Much easier. You've made us feel very comfortable.
Was this something that weighed on you for a while?
Did her.
We looked at it and said, well, we'll just wing it. Because, you give this list of figured out this out and figure this out. Oh, well, we didn't get that done.
What we remember, and what we forgot, we'll tell the kids later. Tomorrow I'll say, God, why didn't I tell this story?
Yeah,
or why didn't I tell them
this?
about this? You do a good job of asking questions.
Welcome to the Ag Tribes Report, a breakdown of the top stories affecting the culture of agriculture, with your host, Vance Crowe. The report begins in 3, 2, 1. Let's begin.
Welcome to the Ag Tribes Report. I'm your host, Vance Crowe. Each week, I bring on a co-host that represents one perspective of the many ag tribes that collectively make up U.S. and Canadian agriculture. This week, we have the one and only Doug Whitehead, a Canadian farmer and trucker who sold peas at church, rants about grain prices and Trudeau, and believes the food system's rigged unless you fight back. Doug did some ice trucking in the past and is one of my favorite people I met as a result of starting my podcast more than 5 years. Doug, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Ag Tribes Report.
Well, thanks for having me, Vance. It's awesome to be here.
So how are things in Canada?
Well, it's starting to warm up, so it's nice now. It's been a long winter. It felt, like I said, I don't know if I'm getting old or soft or what, but it felt like it was a long, cold winter. And it's nice to see the other side of it. Days are getting longer and the sun's feeling warm.
And to warm yourself up over this winter, you did not one, but two 50Ks, huh?
Well, the first one didn't warm me up because I did it in Falcon Lake, Manitoba. So that was 50K outside. And then the second one I did a couple weeks ago in Alabama.
And so day in and day out, how do you spend your time, Doug?
Winter time's a little bit slower. Me and my younger brother run a trucking company. We have 7 trucks on the road full time. So I do all the dispatching. He works in the shop and keeps things rolling. And then we've got some jobs we're hauling our own grain, and we do some intercrop on our farm. So we grow oats and peas together, and we were separating that. That took I had to wait for the nicer weather for that. So that took about 2 or 3 weeks, I guess, separating intercrop. And that's all done now, and we're kind of ready to get some grain cleaned up and then think about seeding in a month and a half here, I guess.
Wild to think that seeding is just around the corner. All right, this week on the Ag Tribes Report, we are going to explore the de-escalating trade war with Canada. Trump at the last moment changed all my plans to talk about tariffs, but we've still got a lot to say. We're also going to dig into claims that from New Zealand, Australia, and U.S. dairy farmers accusing Canada of dumping cheap milk globally, spotlighting the tensions over their supply management system. Then we're going to look at Ag Secretary Brook Rawlins' $1 billion push to curb egg prices due to bird flu. And lastly, we're going to talk about Canadian patriotism sparked by Trump's tariff threats. We're going to ask the question, is this hype, or is this a genuine thing going on with Canada? We're also going to explore the Bitcoin land price report. We're going to hear Doug's take on the Peter Thiel paradox and ask about his worthy adversary. And we're going to do that all in just 30 minutes. If you are watching the podcast live, don't forget you can comment on X and other platforms, and we will include your comments on here. So let's get started. Trade war tariffs impacting ag on both sides of the U.S.-Canada border. What I was preparing to talk about was the fact that we were going to see massive 25% tariffs and then retaliatory tariffs and then maybe even moving them up again between the U.S. and Canada. And everybody knows the U.S. Sells a lot of commodities up to Canada. Canada sells a huge percentage of their commodities down to the United States. And of course, the United States needs a lot of inputs from Canada in order to be as productive as we are. But Trump said just a few hours ago that they're going to put a pause on these tariffs. So let's talk a little bit about what Canadians' perspective was on these tariffs. How did they feel about what was going on? What did you expect was going to happen, Doug?
Well, to really expect anything is kind of hard because was this the third time we've had now from tariffs on, tariffs off, tariffs on, tariffs off? I mean, just personally, I guess, like we have some oats for sale and I'm trying to sell them, but they can't get a bid on old crop oats. As typically our oats go to Minneapolis to the millers, General Mills or Quaker Oats down there, and the buyers, they aren't fully bought up through summer, but they're no bid right now, waiting on tariff concerns, I guess. So maybe that'll change tomorrow. I don't know, but yeah, that's.
Well, I definitely saw American farmers talking about, you bring up milling, Greg Gunthorpe, Jason Mock, all these people were talking about how potentially the tariffs make it possible for small scale U.S. milling. So you could start to have people that are growing smaller scale being able to mill, but at the current, global trade made it so Canada could produce things like flour so much cheaper that it didn't pay to have milling here in the United States. I think there are some American farmers that are a little bit disappointed that the tariffs aren't on.
Yeah, maybe. I wonder how much that is just a function of American farmers don't want to change their cropping plans. Like that's maybe a different category altogether, but like guys grow corn and soybeans because that's what the government pays them to grow. And they're not going to grow wheat just because they can mill their own wheat. Like that's hard work and low margins, and you got to find make your own business and find your end users. And it's no different than the guys that are like, how many guys have started their own butcher shops and it didn't work out because it's either the government gets in the way or you don't find the markets, or you're competing with JBS and the big boys. Like there's big boys in the milling space too, and they're not going to take kindly to somebody else stealing their margins.
Yeah, I mean, I think that tariffs, my impression of tariffs is that it can really help a country for a short amount of time. And then all of a sudden, the tariffs, instead of helping make you be like, hey, we're going to start up our own milling process, hey, we're going to change the butchering laws, all of a sudden it also means you don't have competition. So you can get lazy. You don't necessarily have to produce. So to me, my read on economics is that tariffs have a short-term impact, and long-term, it causes stagnation. Yeah.
Well, I wonder, like the goal of the tariffs is that and then the idea is that they can lower taxes, right? In the States, they offset one with the other. So in Canada, we love taxes and we love high taxes. So that's why we hate tariffs, is because they don't want to lower taxes from our government's perspective.
Well, and from what Americans talk about, they say Canadians have a ton of tariffs on things, and that when we try and send stuff over to you, you guys do make it more expensive for our producers to be able to make it work in your country.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, there's been all the supply managed systems are all tariffed, and those tariffs have been on for decades.
Well, speaking of price changing, let's move on to headline number 2. Canada accused of dumping dairy products by rival exporters. From Bloomberg, as of January 15th, dairy companies in New Zealand, Australia, and the U.S. have accused Canada of dumping low-priced milk products into global markets, urging their governments to intervene. The Dairy Companies Association of New Zealand, along with industry groups from the other nations, claim that Canada's supply management system artificially underprices surplus milk, disrupting dairy markets. This follows reports of Canada wasting nearly 7 billion liters of milk since 2012, valued at $14.9 billion, while exporting $500 million in dairy products in 2023. So the other countries are saying, hey, you guys are making it so your prices are artificially propped up, And when you talk to U.S. dairy farmer Dwayne Faber, he says Canada will literally push their entire country into a depression before pulling the 280% tariff off of imported dairy products. Doug, you are a consumer of dairy in Canada. Does Canada Supply Management, how does that feel to you?
Well, I mean, it's I don't know. It's been that way my whole life, so I guess I don't really know. No, I've been drinking raw milk lately, so I have a source for that. I guess that maybe I shouldn't say that publicly, but it's supposed to be good. I haven't got sick yet, so it tastes good.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I can say about the managed dairy is that it is a very small but very vocal group of people, and whenever you bring it up, I will hear from people for weeks after this about how I need to talk to this person or that person in order to get a fair shake on the what they call the the dairy cartel.
Yeah.
But it seems like they are definitely propping up prices by putting out tokens. My understanding is there's basically a system where not just anybody can start dairying. You have to get a token from the government.
A quota system, they call it.
A quota system, yeah. And then that quota making it so they can't overproduce. Whereas in the United States, if you get a dairy farm, you're going to try and produce as much milk as you possibly can, and that's going to bring the price down to the marginal cost of production.
Yeah, for sure. It's got a lot to do with Canada being so split between the East and the West, because the majority of that dairy is in Quebec, and that they have all the political willpower on their side. And there's dairies across the West as well. And I guess I should have looked up what the percentages of that are, but you always hear it's the Quebec dairy farms that aren't going to let it go, and they have all the pull in the government.
Yeah, I did. I have a Canadian friend that told me one time that she thought that there was a chance that the tariffs actually would really rip Canada apart, because if Quebec lost something like its supply management, it would cause them to further fan the flames towards secession, and then that secession push would make the broader government vulnerable to, say, the West going to secession. And so some of this push by Trump might be a way to continue to sow disunity inside of the country. How does that fit with your understanding?
It feels right. I mean, you hear all about the Alberta secession, just talk of it, I guess, and like Quebec had a referendum in the 90s, I think, to leave, and narrowly stayed within Canada. So that's been ongoing for 30 years now. Yeah, I mean, everybody gets mad about the 51st state propaganda, but it's already been happening for 30 years, talking about breaking up the country. So I don't know, these lines they're just lines on a map. They're made to be redrawn.
Oh boy, you are saying some fighting words to some Canadians. We'll get back to that, because I want to talk about whether the wave of patriotism is real or not. But moving on to headline 3, Secretary Rawlins plans to bring down the price of eggs. I want to play this clip here. This is played at the White House just yesterday regarding Secretary Rawlins.
Egg crisis in this country. The president is wholeheartedly committed to ensuring we're increasing our egg supply, and we're also bringing down cost. And Secretary Rawlins has been all over this issue. She comes from an agricultural background and family. That's why she's leading that very important department. She wrote an amazing op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. She's been all over the media talking about her plan. She has a real plan. The president endorses it. And he even, gave her an off-the-prompter shout out last night to say, Brooke, I'm counting on you. It's an important issue. And this White House is working with Secretary of Agriculture every single day to address this issue.
So when I hear that, it just kind of further the flames of my belief that so far Secretary Rawlins has only been a super FFA officer. And I don't know if that means anything to you, but she's been going to a lot of places. She's been waving her hand a lot. She's been saying, hey, we're working on things and we're so excited to be working together. But not a lot of plans. However, she is going to get $1 billion to spend on this. So last week we brought this up. There's been a little bit more details about it. $400 million to help farmers repopulate flocks that have been killed. $500 million for biosecurity. $100 million for research, including vaccines, and they're going to try and do just a ton more build out. So this is all going on with the backdrop of Elon Musk tweeting that the Biden administration is the cause of the bird flu, saying that it was the Biden administration basically being way overzealous on how many birds they killed, egg-laying hens, And that's why we have an egg shortage. It's not necessarily something we need to spend $1 billion on. It's just something that we caused ourselves. What about Canada, Doug? Are you guys experiencing wild prices in eggs due to bird flu?
No, it hasn't changed anything here. Like eggs are a supply managed system in Canada. They're under the quota system as well. So, and I've never heard any talk about bird flu in any of the barns. That I don't firsthand talk to any egg producers, but I know egg prices are just it's never really been talked about here.
It's wild to me that it is not a problem there, that you guys aren't hearing it talked about. I mean, here you run the spectrum of people being like, this is a catastrophic problem. I heard a guy talking about how he went on a bird hunt maybe a month or two ago, and that everywhere they went, there would be all kinds of dead wild fowl. And then waterfowl. And then on the other hand, you hear people on X saying, hey, no, this is just a man-made crisis. Either the government is the one that killed all those or they're faking the disease. And then even more than that, you hear people talking about this is a man-made disease that came out of a lab in Georgia.
They wouldn't do that.
What do you think? What's your sense on the realness of this issue?
There probably is a disease that's gotten into, like, you get into those barns, like any like close confinement barns or whatever. There's a million chickens in a small barn. You get one little bug that goes through, it can spread through that like wildfire. And how to determine where you start your cull and where you end your cull, you probably got to be overzealous on culling to get them all. You kill a bunch of healthy birds to kill the sick ones. I think it probably makes sense from a standpoint of if the disease is there, that's how you cull things. You got to kill them all, basically. Like you can't let one go and then get into the next barn, because then it's a wildfire, literally, right?
Yeah, and there's something truly dark about needing to cull animals. I remember during COVID when they had to kill all those pigs because there just wasn't anybody there to cut them up.
Yeah.
With bird flu, you got to say, are we erring on the side of caution in order to preserve this, or can you go too far? I know I heard people complaining about how the circles drawn around these egg-laying hens was so large that they're doing major biosecurity where they don't allow people to work in multiple barns, and so why are you killing these birds? And maybe they went over the top, but I'm also understanding of, like, if you're going to nip this thing in the bud, you got to go all the way.
Yeah, it's really hard to know how severe this virus is, or whatever it was that was going through. I remember, when COVID times, talking to a hundred colony in Alberta, and they had to cull a bunch of birds because there's no demand for the eggs for their laying hens, and they had to cull birds that were of laying age because there's no use for them.
Man, have you seen the way they cull birds for this bird flu, where they put that foam in there?
No.
Oh man, it is truly out of like a dystopian movie, because they start putting the foam in on one side of the barn and it rolls just like the fog or the mist over these birds, and then it basically suffocates them. And it's supposed to be the most humane way to do it, but I watched one and I was like, that's the stuff of nightmares there, because the sound of a hen house is really loud, and then it just gets quieter and quieter and quieter. It's dark.
It's dark, yeah.
All right, on to headline number 4. This was suggested by Doug, so Canadian audiences, I have very little opinion here, because I think what he's about to say
you have no opinion.
is controversial. Canadian patriotism over tariffs, is it real or is it hype? There has been a noticeable surge in discussions about the newfound Canadian patriotism, especially in response to external pressures like the U.S. President Trump's policies, like the 25% tariffs and the 51st state. The Calgary Herald on February 14th highlighted a tidal wave of national pride, with Canadian flags selling out and patriotism becoming a buzzword. But on the other hand, the Globe and Mail, they also wrote dramatic changes in a short time, with Canadian historically favoring quieter patriotism now waving flags more fervently than ever. The Hub, however, takes a more skeptical stance, arguing that patriotism feels performative, more like tourists jumping on a trend than a sustained commitment to national responsibility. Doug, you are there on the ground. Is it fake or is it real patriotism?
Well, yeah, with everything, there's nuance to it, right? But I think one thing our government is really good at is speaking in platitudes and talking down to its citizens. I don't know if you maybe didn't see Trudeau today. Just today, he was on something and he was crying, literally crying on it, saying how he has Canadians' backs and he always has. And for the last 10 years, he's done everything to preserve Canada, and then now we've got these tariffs. And one of the funny things about these tariffs is that, it's 25% tariff, and say it makes everything cost 25% more. We also have a carbon tax in Canada that's going up April 1st by another $15 a ton. It's at $90 now and goes up to $105 in April, and that could be canceled with a stroke of a pen. So if they were truly worried about Canadians' pocketbooks and having some sustainability in this country, all they had to do is cancel this carbon tax. It does absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and it's going to get wild in the U.S. if they really can cut out a lot of the carbon nonsense that's gone on that's really hampered a lot of industry. You're going to watch U.S. companies just rocket forward while your companies and just individual taxpayers are being, knuckled down by this carbon tax, which is, I think it's bad in the U.S., but Canada's is way worse.
Yeah, it's insane. I saw it'll add 3 or 4 cents a liter to the price of gasoline at the pump once it goes up. So that's in addition to what it is now. It's 20 cents a liter or whatever it is right now of carbon tax on the price of gas.
So the people that are, booing at the national anthem and pushing back against the 51st state, is this, could it be split between right and left, west and east? Is there semblance of order to it? Does it make sense? Is it a growing thing, or just kind of it hit a fever pitch and it's gone now?
Yeah, it's hard to, I don't know. It sure seems like you always want to blame the left and you want to blame the east, I guess. But that is where they were booing the national anthem. But I don't know, you go to a hockey game in Winnipeg and they would boo the national anthem there too, because that's where all the left-leaning people live, and in Manitoba. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. It feels so fake. Like I like referencing the book Catcher in the Rye, and Holden, he calls everybody phonies. Everybody, all the people in charge are phonies. They're all phonies, and it feels like that in our government. They're just fake. Everything's fake. Like it's all performative, and there's just so many things that we forgot about now too. Like the one note I made was just the fiscal deficit. They were supposed to come up with the budget in November, I think it was, and it was a $45 billion deficit, and the finance minister Freeland quit or got fired or however that went down just before reading out this budget. So then there were a couple more days after that getting it out, and it came in at $62 billion deficit. So they were 50% over their deficit, and nobody's taking accountability for that. Like that's brushed under the table, and now we're just booing the U.S. national anthem because it's just platitudes. Like it's something we can do that doesn't mean anything. Nobody's going to have to raise. It's like having a Ukraine flag in your Twitter bio. Like you can just, I stand with Ukraine. Okay, do you? Like,
yeah, are you sending your kids over there to fight? You going to put boots on the ground?
Nobody is, right?
Yeah, everybody talks about Trump potentially either being, people perceive him as being a bumbling idiot or playing 4D chess. But the guy I think is playing 4D chess is Trudeau, because he went from being completely ousted to being like, for real guys, I'm going to quit, to now it's like your elections aren't scheduled. He's still running the country. It seemed like the pressure came off of him because he was retiring. This is a guy that has figured out how to play that game.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. It's as crooked and awful as it is. And then they'll bring Carney in, who is just part of the group. Like he was the central banker in Canada for a while, and then he went to the Bank of England and ran that central bank. So he's all about central banks and how those people operate. So he's coming back, and he's probably going to become the PM next, I guess. Like I don't know if we have an election. I don't know when that. That was one thing that Trump had said. Like he was mad at Trudeau. Like, you can't even tell me when your next election is going to be. How's that a democracy?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I've learned is I never really comment on Canadian politics because I can't explain how any of your parliament works, your elections, nothing. So what do I have to say about it? All right, that's going to do it for our headlines this week. If you have headlines, it is so helpful if you send them to me on X at Vance Crow or Vance at legacyinterviews.com. Now we are going to head to the Bitcoin land price report. This is where we really discover what is the price of land. Last week, Bitcoin was down all the way at $84,369 at that low price on sale. Today, we're sitting at $89,295, which is up 6%. And if we convert it for our Canadian friends, one Bitcoin will cost you 127,589 Canadian dollars. And so when we start to compare that to farm ground, Doug, how much is an acre of high quality farm ground in your county?
We're our province of Roland is in the Red River Valley, Manitoba. So it'd be somewhere around $12,000 Canadian an acre here.
And so, in other words, one Bitcoin, so 1 acre of ground will cost you 0.094 Bitcoin. In other words, 1 Bitcoin will buy you 10.6 acres of land in the Red River Valley of Manitoba. How does that sit with you, Doug?
That's cool. I mean, you can buy a nice yard site for 1 Bitcoin.
Are you a Bitcoiner and the Canadians around you? Is anybody into Bitcoin?
Yeah, a few guys. I've got a few of my friends that are shitcoiners. So we have the chirps about that. I'm a maxi, Bitcoin maxi for sure. I don't touch shitcoins. I've lost so much money on pump and dumps and all the other bullshit investing that I've done that I'm not playing with any of the other ones. So yeah, I started buying Bitcoin about 3 years ago, I guess, and I've been stacking it, and I have it off chain on a cold wallet. And I know, man.
You're singing my language.
I should give you some for all of it, because I haven't got into the Raspberry or the nodes. I haven't got that far yet.
So for anybody that doesn't know, what Doug is saying about shitcoins is, and I think if you're not a Bitcoiner, you're like, wait, that's not being fair. How can you say that? Why would Bitcoin be the good one and these other ones? But what most Bitcoiners, once they've really studied it, begin to understand is these other coins that are out there, they are issued by somebody or a group of people. And the group of people will say, all right, we're going to issue a coin. We're going to do like an initial coin offering, but we're going to do some pre-mine, meaning we're going to keep back 10%, 20%, 50% of the coins that we're going to put out there. And we're just going to hold those ourselves. We aren't going to pay for them. We're just going to have them. And then we're going to put these out to the market. And then when they decide, hey, we're going to try and run this up, and then we're going to dump our stack. So they make these, they call them pump and dumps. And there's all these stupid games that these people play. Whereas Bitcoin, that can't be done. Bitcoin started as, they call it the Immaculate Conception. It was, once the paper came out, people could go mine Bitcoin, and there was no group that's got the certain pre-mine. Nobody can control it. And another interesting fact about Bitcoin is, since there is no central issuer, if a transaction happens that people don't like, there's no reversing it. Whereas in all these other coins, Ethereum, Ripple, if they don't like a transaction that's happened, they can go, oh, why don't we rewind the tape and we'll do it another, and move these coins over here, or reverse that transaction. And to Bitcoiners, we say that makes it not safe. It makes it always vulnerable to either a group of individuals or a government coming in and dominating that thing. And so if you compare Bitcoin to all the other ones, they are shit. Bitcoin is the only one.
Yeah.
How does that strike you? Good explanation?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. You don't get the opportunity to roll it back. It's the guys in charge that do, and you're not going to be the one in charge.
Exactly. And I mean, we're going to see tomorrow what the White House is going to say about how they're going to have a crypto strategy for the future. I am not hopeful. I'm not excited about this. I think that it's likely there's going to be a bunch of these shit coins getting propped up by the U.S. government. I don't really know how I feel about the government spending U.S. dollars to buy Bitcoin, but I do think it just goes to show that Bitcoin is here to stay for a very long time.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Are they still auditing Fort Knox then and trade some of that in for Bitcoin or what?
Gosh, I hope so, man. Who knows what's going on with Fort Knox? I do think they are going to do that. I think it's been a fun thing for everybody to keep in the news. All right, now if we're going to keep on schedule, let's do the Peter Thiel paradox. This is where I ask Doug, what is one thing that you believe that almost nobody in your tribe agrees with you on?
Well, I wrote down here, farmers are largely hypocrites, but maybe I should say like lazy thinkers, because that's
whoa.
But I'm going to include myself in all of this too. So, one of the big ones is we don't trust any of the COVID science, like PCR testing. That was the wrong test at the wrong time at the wrong cycle thresholds. The masking, one mask, two masks, no mask, all the masks, however many, whatever. And then like ventilators, are they good or are they bad, or like all the science around it? Did it come from a lab? Is it like a leak, or how did it show up? But then we go and we spray chemicals on our fields, and there's labels on them, and the chem company says it's safe, so we spray that chemical on our field and it's good. But I mean, all through history, you can go. I read Silent Spring this winter about the history of DDT essentially, and like that was used on everything at one time in the 60s, and then it was banned after it was killing people, and now there's a chemical gramoxone with the active paraquat that's been banned in Canada to link to Parkinson's, and it's still used in the States. There's atrazine's another big one. Like we used that up to 2 or 3 years ago. It's still legal. You guys are still using it in your corn as a herbicide. It's an option. It's legal. Like it's on label. There's no FDA required, or I guess I should say, whatever the Canadian version of FDA is. It's all legal. It's all on label. But I don't know. Like how can we trust one set of science, but the other set that's not convenient to us?
I think you're bringing up a really good point. And, there was a time there where I worked a lot in this space with, hey, we as a society have to come to some agreement about how we will decide what is the evidence that we have that something is true. And if we don't have that, then it's just a free for all. Then it's just, hey, whoever is the strongest gets to make the choice, or whoever is the loudest. And the problem is that trust the science got horribly abused. Yeah. And so it's very easy for whether it's farmers or people like me to be like, you know what? I don't believe in any of that shit. Like maybe I don't believe in, I don't believe in mRNA vaccines. Maybe I don't believe in vaccines at all. Maybe I don't believe, to your point earlier about, they said pasteurized milk is really good. Well, maybe raw milk is really good. Yeah. So I think it's good to be able to question things. That's the core of science. But at the end of the day, there's got to be a thing that we agree on that leads us to answers to complicated questions that we can say, we're doing the best we can with what we know. And right now, science has been put in a wood chipper, and it may be generations before we get that back.
Yeah, and it's a reputation that it deserved too, because it was wrong on a lot of it, and just very wholly about how it's the science. The science is settled, right? Like you heard. How many times did you hear that? It's trust the science, and the science was wrong. I mean, the glyphosate's the next big one to go down. I mean, we're still using glyphosate on our farm, but we're trying to use less. We're growing different crops where you can use less. We're using fulvic acid and other strategies where you can cut back your percentage of actives on your crop and doing fewer passes, but we're still using it. And
yeah, I mean, there's something going on with our food system, and people are looking around and saying, is it this, is it that? And I think my hypothesis, I'm not sure if I said this in the Ag Tribes report yet or not, but I think that farmers may not get glyphosate banned, but what may happen is that the FDA says, you can only have, 1 part per trillion of glyphosate in your Wheaties or in your Cheerios, and oh, nope, all of these Wheaties get thrown out. And what that will mean is anybody that's growing wheat north of, I don't know, Nebraska is not going to be able to do it because they use glyphosate to do dry down, and there's always going to be a little bit of residuals. It's going to radically change agriculture, even if it isn't banned, even if it's legal to use, but just not acceptable in food grade systems.
Well, and that's assuming people are going to follow the rules then too.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, and then there's just so much going on that once we broke our trust in science, there's no telling where things will go. Even things that are safe will get thrown out with the bathwater on this one.
Yeah, this is almost like culling the chicken herd, right? We're going to throw out all the chemicals and some of them are fine probably, but it's the fact that they ruined everybody's trust in their system, and that you can't trust what you hear.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of like the slow foam coming towards us. We're all going to get choked out. Well, I think that you did a good job on that one. I initially did not agree with your bombastic statement, but I think you get an 8-7 on this one. That's
really?
good. Yeah.
Sidney Crosby. I love it.
All right. So now headed to the worthy adversary. This is where I ask Doug, who is one person that you respect but strongly disagree with?
So yeah, this is always a fun one too. It's fun to see what people come up with and why they pick certain things. But I said Gabe Brown, I guess, farmer from Bismarck, North Dakota. Do you know who he is?
No, go on, tell me about him.
So he's like a pioneer in the regenerative ag movement. He's got I think they call it a 5,000 acre farm with livestock integration and intercropping. I don't know intercropping, but cover cropping and farm to gate. Sales, like selling flour and pasture raised lamb and beef and pork and all this, doing a lot of great things. But I went and listened to him speak once. I don't know, pre-COVID days. So it's funny how you mention things as COVID and pre-COVID now. And he's just like an overweight, unhealthy looking guy, and he's there lecturing me on how to farm and make healthy things. And I did, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. Like he always had a slide that my farm, here's my field is, look how green and healthy it is, and here's my neighbors, and it's terrible because he doesn't farm the way I do. So I just don't think that he was selling the message of regenerative ag properly. It just turned people off. He turned me off, and I'm into the same space as he is. Like I believe a lot of the same principles of soil health and how you regenerate your land and grow healthy crops, but you can't do it by talking down to people and then they're just going to argue with you and disagree.
Wow, that's a good one, and it's one that you believe in. I saw these kinds of things like when I was working at Monsanto. They had hired a dietitian to go out and talk with other dietitians about the health of certain types of pesticides and GMOs, and the guy was super nice but morbidly obese.
Yeah.
And you would say like any mom that you're trying to talk into, that you're kind of making fun of, these yoga moms or these crunchy moms that are believe in all the pseudoscience, well, they're fit and healthy and you are not, and it's very difficult for you to be able to stand on anything because your physique is giving you away.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first thing people look at, right? And it's going back to there's a Rogan episode with that Peter Hotez, the vaccine guy, and Rogan grills him on what do you work out? Do you eat well? And he's like, no, I like Twinkies, but take the vaccine. You need the shot because that's the only way. And for me, I have a autoimmune disorder of arthritis, and it's something I've battled my whole life, and so I kind of take it a little more to heart, like how you need to look after your own health. Like I spent a lot of years not being healthy, like partying and doing that kind of stuff through my 20s and a lot of my 30s. And then I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I did something about it. I started lifting weights and eating healthy and looking after what you put in your body. And then it just kind of transformed my mindset with the farm too. I couldn't have one without the other. I couldn't farm conventionally and then also complain about having a health ailment. Like I just couldn't square that circle or whatever, I guess.
And you said you've been drinking raw milk. I'm super interested in this, but I've not yet tried it. Could you tell in a blind taste test raw milk?
I don't think so. I honestly haven't drank regular milk for years. I hadn't, and you probably could because it's a little bit creamy. I don't know. I think you probably could because it's quite fat. So I think you'd be able to tell the creaminess. Maybe if you had what's 3% or whatever pasteurized milk, it might be similar. Maybe, but. It doesn't taste. It doesn't taste. It doesn't have a gamey taste or it doesn't. That's what some people had warned me about. It has a raw milk taste, but I couldn't tell that.
And what made you decide to make this decision? And actually, before you say this, you may not be able to tell from Doug. He ran 50 Ks. I got to meet him up in Canada. He is a monster of a man, super physically fit. So this is no joke here. And whatever Doug's doing, I'm open to learning about for myself. But what made you decide to do raw milk?
It's got the healthy microbiome to it. Like it's not the pasteurization process kills all the enzymes and any kind of biology that's in milk. That's the whole point of milk is that it feeds young animals, like, and gets them growing, right? That's the whole point of milk in the first place. So when you're pasteurizing that, you're killing all the enzymes out of it, and then you just have a adulterated product that doesn't have the biologically good things that getting back to the science, where it's hard to really quantify a lot of that stuff because we don't know a lot of these microorganisms, and that's getting into the soil health side of things too. There's so many bacteria and fungi that we don't even know in the soil, and we're sterilizing the soil a lot of the times and killing all that stuff that we don't even really know exists. But that's why I started drinking the raw milk, and I have a person I know, she's able to get it for me, so it's quite easy.
You got a dealer. Is it illegal in Canada?
I think so, yeah. I think they're not allowed to sell it. Like, I don't know. The cops come here and catch me drinking raw milk. I don't know what's going to happen, but.
Well, I think that the raw milk problem in the United States definitely turned the tide of quite a few Amish people and brought them out. So it changed the course of the future. And I think that it's going to be a bigger and bigger part of certainly U.S. agriculture. And it sounds like maybe Canadian agriculture too.
It's just one of the biggest things is the endocrine system in people, and having unhealthy endocrine system, because that's what controls your hormones. And then, I mean, there's certainly no shortage of hormonal problems in the world these days, whether it's gender dysphoria or depression or anything like that, any kind of mental issues. It's all hormone related, and due to hormone imbalance, and hormones are all driven by what's in your gut and your endocrine system, your intestines. And so anything you can do to get better bacteria, healthier bacteria in your gut health is worth trying, at least.
Well, Doug, this has been absolutely fantastic. I will add your worthy adversary to my list of worthy adversaries on X. If people wanted to follow you, interact with you, decide to run a 50K with you, where should they go?
I'll come to my house, probably the easiest way. I'm on Twitter. I don't post that often. I think I'm Doug W033 on Twitter. And I post on Instagram most of my fitness stuff, and Twitter I try and keep to the farm stuff, because it seems like those platforms are more meant for that, meant for each other. But yeah, follow me on Twitter, I guess, if you want.
Well, I needed a Canadian for this big day that was going on, and man, I'm so excited to hear you continuing to go with Bitcoin, and this has been a blast. Thanks for coming on, Doug.
Yeah, it's been a blast, Vance. It's been awesome getting to know you, and through the legacy interview process. And my parents,
that's right. Your parents did it.
Yeah, my parents still talk about it. I gave it to them for Christmas a few years ago, I guess, and they made a whole adventure of it and toured down to St. Louis and hung out with Vance for a day or maybe 2 days even. And they still talk. It was the best present I've ever given anybody.
Well, wonderful. I'll take that. And if you're interested in learning more about legacy interviews, go to legacyinterviews.com. And if you're interested in taking me up on getting some Satoshis, download the River app. You can do that by I'll post a link to River on my on the show notes, and there you can download the app and send me a receive address, and I will send you 125 Satoshis. And then you can have them, you can play them with them, you can shoot them over to your friends. Check it out. River.com has been a great partner for the show. That's going to do it for this week. We will be back next week. I'm not sure who we'll have on. We're going to focus on whatever's going on in the world. But as always, feel free to disagree.